You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
The suggestion that NASA faked the Apollo missions goes back to the very first time Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Some believed he never really went. Others believe that he did make it, but the famous footage and photographs are fake. To find out more about how and why the landings might have been staged, Second Thought has made this video for you. Please check it out, it's great. In the meantime, in this video we'll consider the fact that if the footage were faked, someone had to fake it. And the best suspect is legendary director Stanley Kubrick. What's more, he may have left clues that expose the greatest hoax in history. Not only was Stanley Kubrick an artistic genius, but he was a technical wizard. His groundbreaking film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, made him the obvious suspect to fake the moon landings. It came out in 1968, over a year before the Apollo 11 landing. Yet its depiction of weightless space travel is still hailed as the most accurate in cinematic history. Kubrick is known as the most meticulous filmmaker ever, and he worked closely with NASA and aerospace engineers. The spaceships and spacesuits were designed in line with actual space travel technology. Images of the moon were constructed using NASA's best maps of the surface, which is why they still stand up today. The film features extensive sequences set on the moon, which use miniatures and front-projected matte paintings to recreate the process of landing and walking on the desolate moonscape. Theorist Jay Weidner says a close examination of NASA footage and still photographs reveals the same camera tricks were used as in Kubrick's sci-fi epic. He believes that Kubrick was hired by the US government to stage the moon landings using the technology and equipment he perfected on 2001: A Space Odyssey. Furthermore, Weidner says Kubrick subverted his vow of secrecy by hiding clues to the truth in his 1980 horror masterpiece, The Shining. The most obvious allusion to the moon landings is in this scene, where young Danny Torrance is playing in the Overlook Hotel. He is wearing an Apollo 11 sweater, and as he stands up, it is like the rocket is taking off. This is probably a deliberate visual gag on Kubrick's part, given the specially designed carpet of the hotel has a geometric pattern similar to Apollo 11's launch pad. With this in mind, Jay Weidner argues there are many more references to NASA's lunar program littered throughout the film. The food supplies in the hotel include Tang, a powdered fruit drink used by NASA on its manned spaceflights. More subtly, the number 11 and the letter A are hidden in shapes throughout the sets. And the Native Americans on the tapestry to the left look suspiciously like Saturn V rockets, the same ones used on the Apollo program. The film begins with the main characters, Jack, Wendy, and Danny Torrance, driving along the Going to the Sun road in the Rocky Mountains. The classical god of the sun is Apollo. Later, when Jack Torrance meets the manager of the hotel, we can see two eagles in the office. Also, Jack's typewriter is a German Adler, or eagle, machine. The symbol of the Apollo missions was the American bald eagle, and the lunar module itself was named the Eagle. Meanwhile, the manager's outfit, comprising of red, white, and blue clothing, means he represents the government. Jack Torrance, on the other hand, is an author, an independent artist looking for a job to support him and his family while he works on his next project. In other words, Jack represents Stanley Kubrick, and the manager represents the government hiring him to work on the Apollo program. The pressure of the huge task gets to him and puts a strain on his marriage. Jack's rant is therefore really Kubrick's feelings about the dark hoax he was forced to perpetrate.
Ever thought about my responsibilities?
Oh, Dick, what are you talking about?
Have you ever had a single moment's thought about my responsibilities? Have you ever thought for a single solitary moment about my responsibilities to my employers? Does it matter to you at all that the owners have placed their complete confidence and trust in me, and that I have signed a letter of agreement, a contract, in which I have accepted that responsibility? Do you have the slightest idea what a moral and ethical principle is, do you? Has it ever occurred to you what would happen to my future if I were to fail to live up to my responsibilities? Has it ever occurred to you? Has it?
As Jack types, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and the nature of the work is hinted at in the typeface, A11 for Apollo 11. It is important to note that The Shining is adapted from the novel of the same name by Stephen King, but none of the allusions to the Apollo program were in the book. They were added by Kubrick as part of his changes to the source material. These changes included altering the book's Room 217 to Room 237. Jay Widener says Kubrick changed the number to draw attention to the moon landings. The average distance of the moon from the Earth is 237,000 miles. 237 is also, according to Widener, the name of the studio where Kubrick filmed the fake NASA mission. However, most of these allusions are hard to prove. The Shining is so layered and visually complex that it lends itself to countless interpretations, as demonstrated by documentaries and critics. Nevertheless, some of these supposed references to the moon are probably misinterpreted. For instance, the average distance of the moon from the Earth is over 238,000 miles. It seems unlikely that the meticulous Kubrick would make that mistake. In fact, the owners of the hotel used for the exterior shots have said that the room number was changed because the hotel had a real Room 217 and didn't want to discourage guests from booking it. In December 2015, filmmaker T. Patrick Murray published what he claimed was an exclusive interview with director Stanley Kubrick. In it, Kubrick says, "I perpetrated a huge fraud on the American public, involving the United States government and NASA. The moon landings were faked, and I was the person who filmed it." Kubrick's widow, Christiane, says the interview is a complete fabrication. The double in the video looks very little and sounds nothing like the real Stanley Kubrick. Furthermore, T. Patrick Murray has given no plausible reason why the notoriously private director would give him an interview, and why he kept the interview secret for 15 years after Kubrick's death. The director's daughter Vivian made a documentary using footage she filmed on the set of The Shining. In July 2016, she issued a statement strongly denying the theory that her father faked the moon landings. She argues that he had too much artistic integrity and distrust of government lies to ever want to help them carry out such a gigantic hoax. Despite claims to the contrary, Stanley Kubrick never said he faked the moon landings. The people who knew Stanley Kubrick best, his family and colleagues, all say he never did it, and it never would. Meanwhile, theories about clues he planted in The Shining only work if you interpret the film one particular way. This hasn't stopped other books and films being inspired by the theory. There is something interesting in the argument that Kubrick's filmmaking tricks were used by NASA to construct the Apollo 11 footage. However, NASA insists the footage is real, as do the Apollo astronauts. Moreover, so does the great director himself.
Just put the end to the record in the argument, and put your hand on the Bible. Swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Several, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
Of course. I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
and get the hell out of the house.
Well, I've
Take your stuff and get the fuck out. Why don't you quote me and say it's bullshit?
I mean, the shadows in the wrong place. I don't give a damn about all that shit.
You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
You want me to knock you in the head?
Well, I want you to swear to God on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Okay.
If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you if you don't leave me alone.
They're beyond human. They couldn't cover it up. They were just too human.
Exactly. You can see on Neil Armstrong particularly. He doesn't want to lie. This guy just doesn't want to lie. No. He's looking down. He just doesn't want to say anything. This is why he didn't give any interviews for the rest of his life.
Look at that. Please do look at that, folks. YouTube video of the first Apollo crew to come back. Press conference. It's really embarrassing. I mean, it's just embarrassing. The lie was so big that they really couldn't fake it that well. It was too much for them.
In the movie 2001, Arthur C. Clarke, very high Freemason, gives you the agenda of high Freemasonry, not the schmuckdom Freemasonry, but the high stuff. He gives you their agenda and their philosophy and their religion in the movie. And in the beginning of the movie 2001, made in the 1960s, they show you the ape men, the hairy guys, supposedly. And the hairy guys are terrified of the darkness, and they quiver in their caves at night, and in the morning they go across to the watering hole and they meet this other tribe of ape men, and they shake their fists and so on each other, go through a little dance, a song and dance, and then they have a drink and sort of muffle off in their own separate ways, and that's how it's been going on forever. And in the little sequences around it, as they're showing you, they show you a pig, you see, as part of their religion, you understand all this later. And they'll show you a little tree branch shaped like a big snake, you see. And you see all these emblems, but these are actually Masonic emblems, occultic, high occultic emblems, you see all through it. And even though the story eventually goes into space, it starts with these cavemen, and an obelisk comes down, this black obelisk. And in the book is more detailed, because the obelisk pulls each caveman out one by one and makes them jump around and stuff, and it's testing them out to see who's got the best smarts. And it picks one of them, and one day at the watering hole, instead of going over and shaking their fists and yelling and screaming and then having a drink and going home, this one picks up a bone, because they love the skull and the crossbones, of masonry, the pirate's flag. He picks up a thigh bone, and then he smashes his enemy over the water hole there, and he kills him. And they're telling you that's the right of might. The right of might. He who will kill is superior. As they give you religions about being meek and mild, they teach another one for themselves. Progress. You see, they have a thing called progress. They hate something called stagnant civilization, arrested civilizations. No, you must have progress. And progress to them is done through those who are willing to kill and become the top chutzpah, the king of the ape men. And then it jumps from there into the future, to the year 2001, and then a space journey occurs, supposedly on the trail of this obelisk that had been on Earth. Ends up on Jupiter, but it's all occultic. It's nothing to do with space travel. There's a Masonic initiation in it. You'll see the computer HAL on board the spaceship traveling to Jupiter, kills off two of the guys that are with him, and then tries to kill off the third guy. He outsmarts it and disables it, meaning he overcame all the natural laws. HAL is the sun, like halogen, halcyon the Greeks, HAL. And HAL, one letter after it, each one in the alphabet is IBM. You see, IBM, you speak it, it's I-beam, the beam from the eye of Ra. The beaming from the eye is between the pyramid, the capstone, and the rest of the pyramid. So everything is shown to you. It's not necessarily that you understand. It's only necessary that you think you understand. Whenever it comes out of these movies, chomping away there, wow, it's a good movie, what's next? I have no idea what it means. And in 2010, as a follow-up to the movie, and it shows you what's supposed to happen in 2010. And so this big thing at the end, where this guy who escaped the computer, remembers, in the next movie, he's timeless, he's ageless, he's become a god because he overcame Halcyon, you see, the sun, the natural order. He overcame all the laws, and he's a god. And a new sun appears in the sky. But as above, so below. So a new sun will appear on earth, a messiah, a being, an entity, whatever it is that they bring forth to you with much hullabaloo and fanfare, I'm sure. but they're telling you their system, that they show you their religion, from evolution, which is their belief system, both physical and spiritual, because they do believe in reincarnation, but they don't believe that everybody reincarnates.
Your children will be born in a world of two suns. Someday, the children of the new sun will meet the children of the old.
Ready?
So we are going back for another prototype.
With who? We can't land on the moon. We aren't touching down for 5 years.
We can make a film that shows us going to the moon without actually doing it.
Operation Avalanche is the faux documentary narrative of two CIA agents tasked with faking the 1967 moon landing. As part of their research into creating a believable fake, they visit the set of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, blurring all boundaries between film and reality.
Do you see what's going on here? Kubrick is getting NASA to make sure that his space movie looks like real space. And so we're going to use his space movie to make sure the real space movie looks like space.
By framing their film as a period documentary, the filmmakers created a unique challenge for themselves: how to have their characters interact with the real Kubrick in archival footage.
Well, I think right at the beginning, we'd said we wanted Stanley Kubrick in the movie. I thought it was going to be so easy because there was going to be film footage of Kubrick, and we would just do the same thing that we do all the time, which is we take the film footage, we green screen me into it, done. Everybody's like, wow, it's like Forrest Gump. So we get to the moment where it's like, okay, so what is the Stanley Kubrick footage we can use? It's nothing.
Kubrick didn't want any footage on, any documented footage being taken during the making of 2001. He only had a couple news crews come in, which is why all that footage is so brutal.
It's based on a real story about the guys investigating Stanley Kubrick. 2001 is so connected with the Apollo launch. Everybody likes saying Stanley Kubrick was involved. So the idea of not having in the movie would be such a letdown, but also kind of bullshitting our way into just show, oh, he's in the room over there, or getting a look-alike. All that stuff just wouldn't fit in the documentary world that we were fighting so hard in every other respect to create.
The initial part, we wanted to sell that we were actually at Shepperton Studios in the UK, and we set up a scout. Our plan was we would go do this tour and then try to sneak away and maybe steal a few shots. But when we showed up, they gave us our passes and they said, okay, now wait outside for the person who's gonna take you around, and we just bailed. We just found the areas of the lot that they were the authentic pieces of the lot that would have been there when Kubrick was there. So we shot a lead-in to that Shepperton sequence there. Everything else on the soundstage was recreated from archival stills.
Excuse me? How'd you set this up?
Tristan Zarafa, he was the one who came one day and was like, okay guys, what if we take high-res stills of behind the scenes of 2001, and we'll comp Matt into it, and I'll make all those still images move.
Which sounded so crazy, and even he thought that this was crazy because nobody ever done this before.
So he took the photographs and he did a 3D projection where he turned the photos into 3D space.
And not only did the world that he created look real, Kubrick could move. He could have actual Stanley Kubrick in the movie.
I would never normally do this, but it's for a friend. His name is Matt Johnson.
And so right away we're like, yeah, we'll just pour everything we have into this.
We then went onto green screen, and on soundstage we recreated camera moves in virtual space, which he then mapped back into the geometry of these photographs, replacing characters so that Kubrick is actually Kubrick, but he's on the body of an actor so that the body moves in the right way. The crazy thing about it was reverse engineering these photos. So trying to figure out, okay, what lens was this shot on? So he would go back and he'd actually find measurements of the soundstage where these sequences were shot, and then be able to take that geometry and make estimations about what lens lengths they were using in the photo so that we could use the same lens length.
The result is a Super 8 camera that Jared has hidden in a bag, and we walk onto the set of 2001, which when we first saw even the most rudimentary tests was just jaw-dropping. We're like, wow, this is really real.
Not bad for on the spot, just figured it out.
Jared, wave!
Spirit, big wave!